and welcome to this video, guys. In this video I want to show the images that I took at Goodwood Revival. For those that might not know what that is, it's basically a vintage car show that showcases cars from the 40s to the 60s. The cameras that I brought were my Nikon F3 and my Mamiya 7, which I no longer have. So the first set of images that I want to show are some panning shots I took of the cars during the practice laps before the actual races started. As you can see in the photos, there's a bunch of motion blur, and that's because I was using most of the time a 1/30th of a second shutter speed. However, there were some that I took at 1/15th of a second, but the ones at 1/15th of a second I think were just a little bit too slow, and so a lot of those images didn't really turn out that well. The apertures that I was using was either f11 or f16. It was pretty bright outside, so I had to make sure that my aperture was really high in order to get those slower shutter speeds. I was also rating the Portra 400 in the camera at 200, just so again I could get a lower shutter speed and not max out my aperture on my lens. One thing I want to say about some of these cars, actually all the cars, is they all sounded incredible, but the few that really stood out were these old V12 Ferraris. Hey, a quick interruption from the video. I wanted to announce that on November 1st, I will be releasing prints for the first time ever. A few of the images shown in this video, as well as some in the future videos to come, will be available for purchase. If you sign up with your email, I will personally send you the password to preview the prints before they go live, a 20% off discount code, and the chance to win a free print when everything does go live. Again, that date is November 1st, and thank you guys. I really like these images, but if there's one thing I wish I could have done differently if I had the chance to do it again, I would probably want to find some sort of a different vantage point, because if you notice in the images, pretty much every single photo, it was taken in the exact same place. Now, if you notice from these photos, a lot of the people are wearing, period correct outfits to match the cars. The cars, like I said in the beginning of the video, were 40s through 60s, so a lot of the outfits that you saw during the actual show were 40s, 50s, or 60s themed, which made it really cool and really interesting to photograph people where it looked like we've gone back in time 50, 60, 70 years. This is my first time shooting Kodak Gold in 35mm form. I've shot a few rolls on 120, but I mean, it did a fantastic job. It did exactly as I expected it to do. It was, it had beautiful colors, very warm tones. The grain was really low. So I have no complaints regarding the film itself. The only thing I can sort of complain about is this lens. This is the 28mm f2.8D lens, which is an autofocus lens from Nikon. And it's on my Nikon F3, which is not an autofocus camera, and it's because I got this lens when I had a Nikon F4. When that camera broke on me, I got an F3 and kept the lens. However, just optically, it doesn't do that well. It doesn't seem to be very sharp. It looks like there's some chromatic aberration that pops up, although film does tend to hide that pretty well. And the other thing that I don't love about it is the focus throw is really, really small. And since I was trying to do some street photography, it made it difficult for me to really feel comfortable and to feel confident about where I was actually focusing. This might be hard to illustrate. See if I can get it to focus on here. Yes, that's at 5 feet. That's infinity. Like, the throw from 5 feet to infinity is pretty insane how small it is, and so it just didn't really instill that much confidence for me personally. I know I mentioned the optical quality wasn't that good, but I also want to say the build quality is pretty bad as well. I don't want to sound like I'm just like dogging on this lens and saying it's a piece of crap, because it works, it does the trick. I love the focal length. I think the 28mm focal length is probably my favorite focal length. It's just the lens itself is not very impressive. And as you can see in some of the images, there are some light leaks, and that's because I really remember taking the film out of this camera, but I didn't. And luckily I was in a really dark room when I opened the back of the camera, and it was quite a surprise when I saw a bunch of film stretch out from side to side, because I would have been pretty sad if a lot of the images that I took at Goodwood on the Nikon F3 were ruined, because they turn out to be some of my favorite images of the trip. Pretty much all of these images were taken outside the paddocks. There are a few where they were kind of in the waiting area before they actually went onto the racetrack. There was one paddock in particular where a few of these images were taken, and it was just full of Ferraris, 4 GT40 replicas, and there was actually a C3 Corvette in there, which I was really surprised to see, considering we were in the UK. Okay, there's one image in particular that I want to talk about. It's of the queue area that I mentioned. It's where all the cars would line up before they actually got onto the racetrack. And there's two small elements of the scene that make it look like it wasn't actually taken a really long time ago, and that's the guy in the very bottom left of the screen. You can kind of see some modern cameras on him. And there's that microphone in the center of the frame. You know, the guy's like holding the boom pole up. And I feel like besides those two elements, you couldn't really tell that this image was taken in 2023. It's really cool to see all these old cars and all the people dressed up in the period correct outfits, and the way that Porsche 400 rendered all the colors in the light make it look like it was taken a really, really long time ago. So the last few images that I want to show are kind of some random ones. They don't really fit the theme of the other images that I showed. So a few of them are from a helicopter. My aunt took me on a helicopter ride as well. She brought me to the UK specifically for Goodwood for a late birthday present because she knows that I'm into cars. I'm really, really thankful for her because I would not have been able to attend the show or even go to the UK if it wasn't for her. And the next set of images were on this like swing carousel type thing. I'm not quite sure what you would call it, but while I was on there, I obviously had my camera with me, and I noticed that the swings in front of me weren't really moving much. They were pretty still as we were going around. And I believe my shutter speed is 1/30th of a second, so I could freeze the motion of the swings, but get a lot of motion blur with the background, which I guess is kind of like a theme with this video. You know, with the first images that I showed with all the cars moving around, and I guess now the last images that I showed with the swings moving around. So now I want to give some closing thoughts about all these images. I'm really, really happy with how everything turned out. You know, I think the Porsche 400 images are good, but surprisingly, I prefer the images that I took on the Nikon F3 with Gold 200 more. It was my first time shooting anything related to street photography, and I had a wonderful time doing that. It was so fun, and you know, I've heard street photographers talk about like getting into this like zone or something, and not to say that I was like in the zone, I guess, but I was like really immersed with looking around and capturing things that piqued my interest, which I really, really enjoyed. Goodwood was so much fun. I hope to go back in the future. So many of the cars that I saw during that trip I'd seen in pictures and seen in videos, but to get to finally see them in person and to hear them and see them driving was something that was really, really special. And even though I did mention I prefer the images that I took on the Nikon F3, I still really, really like the images that I took using Porsche 400 on the Mamiya 7, and I do miss that camera, because if you saw my last video, you know that I've actually sold that camera. Okay, and on that note, I'm going to end the video. If you guys like what you saw, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. I have a bunch of videos planned out, so if you subscribe, you'll be the first to know when those videos come out. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.